Tensions are on the rise in and around the Korean Peninsula on the back of continued nuclear and missile provocations by Pyongyang. Despite a series of sanctions imposed by the international community to curb North Korea's nuclear ambitions, Pyongyang's ultimate goal remains to be recognized by the international community as a legitimate nuclear state. What will it take to contain North Korea's nuclear ambitions? Is it even possible? The Kim Jong-un regime's obsession with nuclear weapons, the topic of our discussion today with North Korea's former deputy ambassador to London, Thae Yong-ho. So North Korea manages to keep itself in the global highlight or spotlight with its belligerent rhetoric and whatnot regarding its nuclear weapons program. I think just weeks or months ago, you yourself warned that North Korea is in the final stages of making its nuclear weapons program. How strongly do you feel about that now? Do you still feel strongly about that?
Yes, of course. North Korea's history of a nuclear program is the history of North Korea itself. Even though North Korea's the nuclear issues became one of the hot issues of international politics in the beginning of 1990s, but actually the North Korea's nuclear development started in the late of 1950s.
1950s?
And yes, at that time there were two important historical incidents which greatly influenced not only Kim Il-sung, but at that time the North Korean leadership itself. Korean War was the first war after nuclear arms race between America and the Soviet Union. Soviet Union succeeded its first nuclear test in August of 1949, and Korean War started in June 1950. So the Korean War broke out just 10 months after the first success of Soviet Union's nuclear test, and at that time the Kim Il-sung and North Korean communists at that time did not understand the impact of the shock of possible nuclear war. But when American troops involved in Korean War, and later when Chinese army also took part in Korean War, then the American president Eisenhower warned a possible nuclear strike against North Korea. That kind of, rhetoric warning by American president towards North Korean population brought an unexpected result to North Korean leadership. When the news spread to North Korean society, millions of people all of a sudden defected North Korea to the south. So the lessons which Kim Il-sung and North Korean leadership learned from this is that the nuclear weapons could play a very important psychological, the role towards the enemy and also towards his own people. That was the first lesson North Korean regime learned. So right after the Korean War in late of 1950s, where North and South Korea were in a very great difficulties in overcoming the war destructions, even at that time North Korea started, to it's a kind of, initial stage of nuclear development. For instance, the Nuclear Research Institute was established in 1955 just 2 years after the Korean War. And from late of 1950s and the beginning of 60s, North Korea sent the most, the talented, young people to Russian Nuclear Institute, which is called Dubuna. It has really a long, the history background. The second, the International Institute, which struck Kim Il-sung and North Korean leadership, was the dispute between a Soviet Union and the China. There was a border dispute between Russia and China, and this dispute even escalated into the arms conflict. And Russians at that time warned Chinese that they may destroy one of two big cities in retaliation of Chinese army's attack on Soviet Union's army. At that time, the China warned Soviet Union that if they were attacked by Soviet Union, then Chinese would retaliate, with nuclear weapons and missiles. So Russians had to stop. So this incident told then North Korean regime that even the nuclear weapons can play an important and deterrent role against its own, the so-called, the comrades. North Korea is a very a small country, and at that time, North Korea was heavily dependent on free aid of Soviet Union and China, and that kind of, the interdependency with China and Russia, to some extent and to some time, could play a negative role on the leadership of Kim Il-sung. So Kim Il-sung at that time was very serious to possess nuclear weapons, in one day. So this is the historical background how North Korea, they came to a conclusion that nuclear weapons could play a very important and decisive role in maintaining North Korean society.
So I think I'm learning new things today. Their possession of nuclear weapons could in fact play a big role in a psychological warfare kind of tactics.
Yes.
Against other countries as well as to its own people.
Right.
And secondly, that the history of nuclear weapons program in North Korea goes way back to the 50s, longer than we have ever imagined the rest of the world. Now, it brings me to the question of then how is nuclear weapons program received by the North Korean people, the average, ordinary North Koreans?
North Korean regime brainwashed, quite a long time, its own people that nuclear weapons program can provide the long-term safety, and the nuclear weapons could be a very good guarantee to make North Korea an independent state. And North Korean people are brainwashed that if North Korea has nuclear weapons, then it can reach easily the goal of reunification. This kind of propaganda education work went on several decades. So North Korean people actually are used to this nuclear development program. They do not have any doubt or any suspicions.
So then how does the North Korean leadership afford the development of nuclear weapons program and missile weapons programs?
Oh, there are many ways. North Korea is rich in natural resources, and North Korea's, main export item are natural minerals like, coal and iron ore, and these days a lot of, the products. So actually, North Korean regime can afford, the development of nuclear weapons. And if we compare the total sum of North Korea's trade with outside, the world, actually the money they spend on nuclear and missile program is not, that large.
North Korea basically uses its exports of coal and rare earth minerals and the likes, natural resources, and by exporting or selling them to other countries, they use that money, that profit, to develop their nuclear weapons program. Am I correct to this point?
Yes.
Now, am I also correct in assuming that one of the very, very, very few countries that North Korea exports their coals and minerals to is China?
Yes, mainly China, yes.
So then, is it safe for us to assume that North Korea's trade or North Korea's exports of coal and natural resources to China and the profits that they make from there is funneled to the development of nuclear weapons program?
Most of the money they earned from the trade with China are poured on the nuclear development, yes.
Now, so then, is it safe for us to assume that China, in fact, does play an absolutely key role in trying to denuclearize North Korea if ever that is possible?
Of course, if China is determined to make North Korea give up its nuclear program, then I think, it can be done within 2 or 3 years. For instance, if Chinese cut off all its trade with North Korea and, blockade the whole borderline with North Korea, and I'm absolutely sure that a North Korean system would collapse, within 2 or 3 years. North Korea cannot continue to be existed without the help of China.
There are many speculations around the world whether it is really highly developed or whether it's just a bluff by North Korea.
Oh, I don't think it is a bluff.
So you would say that it is highly advanced?
Of course, if we, start to calculate, for instance, in early of 1960s, North Korea imported its, the size of nuclear reactor from the Soviet Union, and they sent, hundreds of students to former Soviet Union to do nuclear research, even from 1960s, and after the collapse of Soviet Union, North Korea smuggled in quite a number of, Russian nuclear experts to North Korea. For instance, in late of 1990s, there was a special, the buildings right behind of Goryeo Hotel where the Russian scientists, nuclear scientists, were resident. And from time to time, when I went to Goryeo Hotel for any diplomatic functions, I saw many the family members of those Russian scientists, enjoying in swimming pools or restaurants. And also, late of 1990s and beginning of 2000, there was also the secret cooperation on the nuclear development between North Korea and the Pakistan. So all these facts, proves that North Korea so far has never stopped its nuclear development. And, it's been several decades since North Korea started. So in natural process, we have to accept that North Korea's nuclear development has reached very high level.
I wonder what it's like to be a nuclear scientist or an engineer in North Korea.
Oh, yes. Actually, they are provided the basic living, the elements by the government. For instance, in North Korea, the dwelling houses are the most important thing, and in North Korea, a few years ago, North Korea built, we call it Unha Scientists, the street, which is constructed outskirts of Pyongyang city. It was very well, the apartments and those nuclear and missile scientists were provided these good, the houses for their living. And the another thing is that, they are provided the basic, the living, the conditions like in North Korea, the food, ration of food is very important because the most people are not supplied with this kind of, monthly ration of food, but these scientists, and their family members are provided by the government, this kind of, the national, the ration of food. So actually, of course, their life is not the luxury ones, like the normal South Koreans, are enjoying. But in North Korea, their life are better off comparing with the normal North Korean people.
So does North Korea still collaborate with other countries on any kind of nuclear or weapons development programs?
My impression, I think, of the Iran could be a potential, the partner of North Korea in the nuclear, the development program. Now there is a temporary deal between the world community and Iran on nuclear, the program. But personally, I do not believe in that nuclear deal with between Iran and world community. I'm sure that because Iranians are clearly following what North Koreans are doing, so I think to some extent in one day they may break the current, the agreement with the world community and would follow the suit of North Korea.
Wow, you don't believe in the Iran nuclear arms deal with the Western world?
I don't believe it.
Now, another thing I want to ask is THAAD, so U.S.'s sophisticated missile defense system that is to be deployed to South Korea this year. China has expressed strong opposition in many different levels. I'm not hearing much from North Korea when it's actually to deter North Korean threats.
Yes, because North Korea knew very well that the further escalation of this third issue could bring a great dispute between China and South Korea, and North Korea want that this kind of, the great dispute between China and South Korea.
Escalation of tensions
that's
between
right.
Seoul
So
and
let
Beijing.
China and, South Korea, fought each other first, and North Korea want to benefit, from this current, confrontation, and that could make and create a favorable environment for North Korea to win Chinese, the support on North Korea's, the policy. And to some extent, this playoff game, brought some result
Seems to
win.
be working.
And some Chinese, the favor and support on North Korea's the nuclear and missile development, because after the recent missile launch by North Korea, China must, bring a strong condemnation on it. But the level of Chinese, condemnation was very low. And on the meanwhile, a Chinese foreign minister proposed a kind of freeze for freeze deal. You see, so that is what North Korea wanted. and North Korea want to further push, this current trend to that direction.
Now, North Korea's, when we look at the latest North Korea's nuclear weapons development strategy, it seems a little bit different from, for instance, Kim Jong-il days. So the current leader's father's days. What's different about Kim Jong-un's nuclear weapons development strategy?
In Kim Il-sung's era and also Kim Jong-il's era, these North Korea's nuclear development carried on in a very secretive and in later stage with the pretext of denuclearization, the process. They argued that North Korea's the final goal is not the possession of nuclear weapons, but use this nuclear weapon as a card for negotiation, with America. That is what North Korea said. But when Kim Jong-un came to power, things changed greatly because, he wants to create a kind of a strong man's image to its people. And one of the ways to create a strong man's image is to bring a kind of confrontation with America and South Korea, and he wants to create a kind of, image that he is a great rival to American president, So he wants to put his name at the same level of American president. Well, you see, the superpower, Kim Jong-un has a kind of paranoia and obsession on nuclear weapons because when he first came to power, he tried every possibility whether he could occupy South Korea in conventional way. He learned that with the current, the conventional forces, he cannot even win the war or liberate South Korea, but he could be very easily overwhelmed, by American and South Korean forces. So that, made him strongly believe that the only, nuclear weapons can guarantee him to total the elimination of the existence of South Korea. The third reason is his fear of its own people. In recent years, there were a lot of changes in world, the politics like, Arab Spring. In Arab countries,
Right.
There were peoples, and he learned the final results of those dictators and how the world community responded towards those people's uprising. And Kim Jong-un now is really afraid of its own people. He knows that the current North Korean situation is very difficult for people to live in. So he's afraid that there might be a possible, people's resistance or uprising, and he's fully ready to stamp out this uprising at any cost. But if this kind of things happens, then there could be a strong, demand for world community to take actions for humanitarian intervention. Mm-hmm. And if Kim Jong-un does not have nuclear weapons to prevent this kind of intervention from outside of the world, like what happened in Arab or former Yugoslavia, he strongly believes that only nuclear weapon can prevent the possible intervention by outside forces so that he can do anything to stamp out the inside people's uprising. That is the reason why he is so much obsessed, with the completion of nuclear weapons.
But I have a question. So what do we do?
The only solution for North Korean nuclear, issue is the total, elimination of Kim Jong-un regime. That is the only way to solve the current nuclear issues.
Wow. All right, well, thank you so much for this talk today. I think it was both very educative, informative, and profound in its own way, and a lot of lessons to be learned there. Thank you so much for today.
And thank you very much. You have done a very good job.
And thank you for your insights. Yeah, okay.